to set up the live streams everywhere. 1 second. Okay. Just setting it up on Facebook as well. Next video, excellent. Hopefully nobody. All right, going live. Okay, let's do this. Rein, very glad to have you with us on Earthians Unscripted. It took us a while to set up, the podcast and your presence and to have you here. So I'm very, very happy to have you on board, and I'm sure we're going to have a really fun conversation today. So welcome to Earthians Unscripted, Rein.
Thank you, Dimitri. I know that you have been working on this idea of podcast for for quite many years, and I'm also glad to see that you have finally come to this place where you can do those influential podcasts, and therefore really also happy to be one of your guests.
Glad to have you. Well, look, I wanted to start with a question that is very familiar to you, and it is also very familiar to me. But I think a lot of other people will think it's completely weird question that makes zero sense. So, but I think we usually start this anyway. So I'm going to ask you, what is your state of being?
Okay, my state of being this morning. I woke up a bit late today. Yes, so therefore I jumped to a mentoring call straight from the bed. However, this was very beautiful and touching session that we had, one of the entrepreneurs. And this kind of puts me into the state of being that it really gives me the feeling of being grateful to be alive, to be doing what I'm doing. There are great changes for this person's life happening at this moment. And when we finished the session, he expressed his gratitude of being able to talk with me. And then I said that, hey, this is my path with the heart. So if I wouldn't be doing this, some of those accidents that you describe happening close people to you would be actually happening to me to push me to do this. So I'm really thankful that I can do it. So that's kind of the note or state of being for me today.
Thank you. I don't know if you want, but I'll be brief. I think my state of being is actually I'm a little bit agitated this morning, and I have no idea why. I woke up a little bit agitated in the mirror, and I saw this like yellow, blue, green mark. It was not there yesterday, and I got punched in the face on Monday because I do martial arts, as you know, and it was fine. Like on Tuesday, it was fine. On Wednesday, it was fine, and this morning was like all colors of the rainbow, and I was like, oh great, I have rain today. And then I actually remembered something you told when we were doing some mentoring in Tartu, and I had a lot of these, remember, like these kind of things on my hands. And you asked me, like, why do you have them? Are you hiding some layers, like, about who you truly are? And I looked myself in the mirror and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not going to put any makeup. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to fully myself. And and I think like my state of being is also like trying to be fully myself in this podcast with you and today. So that's that to achieve in this day. But in what you said already, there's a few questions. Like, first of all, like, why do we do this? Like, we do this a lot when we talk with you. We ask each other this very strange, very weird question, right? Like, why does it matter? why do you do it? Because I learned it from you. So like maybe I never really asked you because it made sense to me, but maybe you can share why is it important to ask specifically this type of question and not just like, hey man, how are you? What's up?
Well, firstly, of course, when we ask a question, what's your state of being, we presume that we already know what we mean by state of being. And in our context, we kind of want to understand what's happening in your life, what is influencing you at this point in time, what kind of emotions, thoughts, experiences you are having. As otherwise, there will be influence in this call or in this talk or meeting which I have no clue, and therefore I cannot relate to you properly. And it's funny, even more important is if you ask me how my state of being is, then I also get to know my own state of being, because this is something we take for granted. We think we know what's really happening with me, but it takes me some seconds, minutes to actually review what is going on. Okay, I had this happening, these are the emotions came up, these are the thoughts. Now I am actually getting in touch with my own state of being. And when we are in connection with our state of being, of our own and yours, the conversation can be more real, or in that sense we can say that it brings into the conversation more of us. Otherwise, if I only know my thoughts, I will only bring my thoughts.
Yeah, and I think it also changes quite often, the state of being. Once I started doing it in my companies or with my mentees or friends, with my wife, it also kind of like it makes the connection with the person more real, right? Because they're no longer saying, yeah, I'm fine, and like run away, right? They actually have to like pause and think about it. And I think it taught me to monitor it. And I realized I forgot to tell you one thing is that on last week my cat passed away, and like it's been affecting me like the whole week, right? I'm actually quite emotional, and it kind of jumps between it's okay, everything is fine, part of natural process, even though it wasn't a very accidental thing. He just took a normal castration operation, and then 48 hours later he was gone. That makes me very sad. And actually, like I found that it's been a week, and I was talking to a lot of people, and when I share it with people, like our conversations are deeper. Even though if we talk about business, right? We talk about business, but their knowledge of that fact of what happened to me in my life, it kind of makes our connection much more real, and we can go deeper in our conversations, even if we're talking about like I don't know, investments or whatever, something else, right? And I found it so important to open up and not like hide the stuff that is truly happening with you. So yeah, but how often do you actually do it? I was wondering, like, do you do it like every you talk to people? Like, is this question like that you do like all?
Well, there is nothing you should be doing all the time. Well, except breathing maybe, but but in general, you do it when you feel the need for this. So once you already get a grasp of how to connect with people, you can sense if something is off or something is not on the picture. Yeah? I'm talking to you, but I don't feel your full presence. Then I would simply ask, hey, what's going on? Yeah, I don't need to use those complicated terms that what's your state of being. I just need to, hey, how are you? What's going on for you? Are you? And then you share. I can ask questions about, I feel sadness in you. Is this connected to this experience you had with your cat and so on? Then being curious. Um, However, if we kind of, I think it applies with any so said self-development tools, that if we try to use them too often, they become counterproductive. Yes, at some meetings, in one of a fellow colleagues said, I don't really want to do this state of being exercise. Can we just skip it? Which, by the way, he actually exactly did, because this was his state of being by stating this. So, I mean, you need to feel. If you can feel, you know what to ask. You can use different questions. The point is pretty simple. you're curious about what is going on for that person. So sharing and being open, this is a really good connection, and also building a trust for anything else that follows from there.
Yeah. Well, look, I know you for a while, and I know that you, in your old life, so to speak, you were running a fairly big billion-dollar organization. And like, were you already using some of these things in there, or like, how was your life there? Like, was it different, or maybe you can share a little bit of how you transitioned from that to whatever it is you're doing now?
Well, I had no clue. Yes, no tools like this. I think many of the things, however, we do naturally. So if any of the esoteric, spiritual, or self-development or psychological tools that you use are mostly they are natural tools, we are simply not aware that we are using those. So I think I was curious about state of being already there. I didn't know, as this wasn't like in my awareness, oh, I really want to specifically now know your emotional state, or but naturally, yes, I'm pretty sure I employ them, but no awareness of putting them in practice. Okay, thinking that okay, there's something of what could I use? Yes, let's use state of being. No, nothing like this. So I wasn't also very interested in that time anything inner life, I would say. And this I consider very normal part of everyone's journey anyway, meaning that if we are coming into this life, we really need to get a lot of experience what it means to live on this physical plane. There is even this kind of esoteric saying that this first 3 decades go for boot up, yes. loading yourself with all kinds of different experiences before you start to build something. It's kind of acquiring the building blocks, Lego building blocks, from which you create the rest of the masterpiece of your life. So therefore, back at Playtech times, I had no interest in that sense, kind of esoteric or inner world interest. However, I'm always had the interest for people. So this was there. So I remember discussing already in the high school all kind of philosophical topics, like what's really a friendship? How do you understand if you love someone or not? Yes. So this human interest that has always been there. However, I did not put any time or effort and energy exploring those areas when I was leading really second unicorn in Estonia.
But like, you were still leading a second unicorn in Estonia, and a lot of people would that is quite a successful thing to be doing, right? You're leading one of the biggest companies, right? And that is what many people see as success. Would you agree that you were successful already at that time?
Well, like with everything, you need to define, yes, what do you mean by success? Definitely, this traditional way of seeing success, I did see myself successful. I did think that this is how the success look like by the definition I understood from the society. Over the years, however, the success has changed for me. So if I would do the same thing again, this wouldn't be success anymore. However, even my current view of success does not make this previous experience unsuccessful, because I still consider that I was even then on my path with a heart. Only in that sense, it entailed understanding and working very materialistically. Yes, kind of business oriented, money, all those fame related topics, very materialistic. I needed those experiences, therefore they were part of my path. And even now I consider it a success, although if I would repeat it today, this wouldn't be anymore a success. Yes, now my path has turned, so this would be in that sense a failure for my eyes.
So you already mentioned like a single keyword twice, which I think we need to define. And I have to ask you the question because you mentioned the word path of the heart twice. So, what the hell is that, right? What does it mean? What is a path with a heart, and what does it mean to be on one?
Yes, there are many ways how to define or kind of answer this. Recently, I'm using very simple definition for this, and this is I'm the closest to the path with the heart when I'm able to use the most of the skills that I have and qualities that I have in a way that it is most joyful for me. So I'm optimizing two things: most of my skills, most of the joy. So because I could use many of the skills that I have, but I would not be happy doing it. So that then this means that I'm not really close to my path with the heart. So
But what if the skills that you have really bringing you too much joy anyways, right? Like, you've picked a career path because your parents told you to, you gathered a lot of skills, and then you work the only thing you know, and actually does it brings you zero joy. I mean, I think there's a lot of people there in that position, right? Does it mean they can't find a path of the heart, or like what do they have to do then?
the only thing they need to choose or change is to find an application of those skills in such a way that it brings joy to them. So knowing your skills and having those skills and owning the skills is half of the work that you need to do in order to find your path with heart, or to be on your path with heart, because you need those skills. They are, even though it might be arbitrary that yes, my parents forced me to do XYZ, it is nevertheless actually important for us to have those skills. Now the only thing you need to change is to need to apply in a setting that brings you the joy.
Okay, and what if you're struggling with that skills, and you can't quite figure out in which specific thing will bring you joy, right? So maybe an example from my side is that I've gathered a whole variety of skills because being an entrepreneur, you kind of forced, which I think is a complete misnomer, but you kind of forced to learn to do everything really badly, and therefore you have like a huge variety of skills, but it's actually really hard to figure out how best to apply them, for instance. Or then there's the other the other extreme where some, let's say, I know a few people who are professional chess players, right? And that's like all they know. And then like at the age of 39 they go like, I hate chess, right? And then they go like, but that's the only thing I know how to do. Okay, there are some other things there like logic and some skills that they have developed in the process, but they're finding it difficult to apply it somewhere else. So like, what would you do then?
I mean, if we stay with the practical example of yours, so doing this podcast, is this path with, is it bringing joy for you?
Absolutely. Doing it, yes. There are elements in preparing for it that are less joyful than actually doing it, right? So like actually doing it is extremely joyful, right? This brings me joy. And then if I had like a podcast after podcast, and there would be an army of people who would then promote it and set it up and invite guests and do all of those things, that would bring me the most joy, right? If I could only focus on being here in this particular thing. But I realized that to have this joy, I do have to do all these other things.
This is true. However, if we focus on that part of your kind of path with the heart in this context, this means that for you to be doing this kind of podcast very well, you need to know a lot of things in order to navigate, because you will have different people talking about different topics. They have different professions. If you have no way of relating to those because you have zero experience in those areas, the podcast would not be as interesting to listen. So therefore, already this previous kind of career, as you said, being an entrepreneur and learning everything to be able to do them in a crappy way, it still prepared you with a skill being a kind of having a generalistic approach to life, to any area, department of life, so that you can relate from your personal experience, which can make you a great podcast. Yeah.
But here we have another interesting question that I've been asking, and I think I have an answer, but I'm curious what you think about it. Is that, like, is it important to divide this joyful moment from expectations of result, right? And which I mean is that I know that for me to talk to you, right, and to have a podcast, and I don't know why there's a little bit of like doing it over a podcast is maybe a little bit more joyful than doing it without all the cameras. If we just meet with just you and me, right? There's a bit of excitement that I get from maybe somebody watching it. But at the same time, you know, like if I'm not sure if having an of someone watching it and then judging it and saying it was a good podcast or bad podcast actually helps or retracts from my path with the heart, so to speak. Because like if I'm too worried about people thinking, hey, is this good or bad, then I don't think I can be fully myself, right? If I'm doing it fully just to be here, just because it's fun and I don't care what people really think, at least right now, I think I can do a better job, at least for myself. Like I'm having fun. Otherwise, I would over prepare and I would like write 2 billion questions, and like I would be thinking like, how is everybody gonna take it? And I would probably have makeup, um, and stuff like that. But then, like, how do you see that part? Like, do people tend to have like too many expectations for what they do, and is that a problem in the people you work with?
It's true that people definitely want to win all the battles they have. So if I'm talking about joyfulness, then I'm rather referring to the joy of the journey, as opposed to being happy about the end result of doing something. So all of this preparation and is kind of more towards the end result, and then the end result will be defined if people will like it. However, if you focus on actual doing the thing and enjoy the process, then this is the context which we are trying to touch upon, the topic being on the path with the heart, not the outcomes. There is in reality no outcomes as such. It's just we are always in the now, meaning we're always between the past and the future. So the journey is the only thing we have.
This is like actually from the audience, which is very relevant to that from Vido, and it's basically coming to this question, right? That okay, the society or someone else is potentially also important. So the question that Vido had is, and that I also have for you, is like, okay, so joyful is one part of the heart, but that joyful is for you, right? But what about joyful and beneficial to say someone else or a lot? Is that a consideration for being on the path of the heart, or can one be completely selfish, right, and like not care about society in that sense?
Well, I have the saying that life is a selfish process, meaning that if you do something that uplifts you, then it cannot be so that if I'm uplifting myself, this is bringing someone else down. If life would be configured this way, then we have a zero-sum game, yes? So always someone winning, and because someone is winning, someone else must be losing. No, this is not the way the evolution of awareness could evolve. Therefore, if I'm uplifting myself, I'm evolving, then this means that the ripple effect of this always has to be uplifting for others. However, now we good question. What do we mean uplifting? Yes,
I was going to ask that.
I can do my thing, and then I feel that I am uplifting, and then you will be angry at me, and you will say that this was the worst experience ever. Yes. So what do you mean uplifting? This was nightmare. Now this brings us to the other definition of path with the heart, because I'm kind of now gave it from the perspective of how would you recognize it. Yes. However, there is another dimension to this, and this dimension brings in the inner being, meaning that we know ourselves as we know. We call it in different names: little self, personality, and so on. Yes. However, there is another part of us which in different traditions is called differently. In religion, it's called soul. In the path of knowledge, it's called dreamer. In some other context, it's called reincarnating ego, and so on and so forth. Now, if we walk path with the heart, then this means, in an esoteric sense, that we are following the guidance and the leadership of our soul, or dreamer, or reincarnating ego, which the reason that we call the heart is that humans have 7 electromagnetic centers. Indians tend to call them chakras. We are talking about the electromagnetic center that is right here in the center of your chest, and this is the center through which the most of the communication with your soul is going through. So that is the content why we say path with the heart, meaning I'm walking the path that is being led by my inner counterpart. Let's use the term soul at the moment. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm always when we talk about these topics, right? Because a lot of the time when the word you mentioned chakra, a lot of people like run away, and that's right. But at the same time, how do it works this way, right? How do you know for yourself in your own practice that it is important to think about these things in this particular way, and what we do for you?
The reason at the moment I brought this in is that we were talking about uplifting ourselves. And what I mean by this is that this inner counterpart of ourselves, let's call it inner being, yes? Let's not use some weird terms like souls, but let's say our inner being.
Yeah.
This part is ancient, meaning that we are coming to this present moment, to this life, to this experience with already some ideas of what we want to explore. So if I'm following this exploration willfully, then I will have a joyful and kind of easy journey on the path with the heart. If I'm resisting this kind of learnings and this journey and these explorations, then I will have a difficult one. Yes. However, now if we mention that if I'm uplifting myself and I'm doing something that is really close to my heart, and by the way, all humans can sense with this physically. Yeah? With this, we don't need to give this again some weird names, but we can feel whether something's happening here or in the stomach or somewhere else in the base of our spine. You can feel physical sensations. You don't need to have some imagination for that. When I'm doing something that is really touching me and you get angry, so we kind of in outward way we would say that, okay, I uplifted myself and this caused you suffering. However, this is only on the face value of when you're looking. If you go into this experience, the uncomfortable experience, then it puts you into contact with your own inner being and therefore points out something that you should be exploring, but you're not at the moment exploring. Which means that this is in truth uplifting for you. It's pretty much the same as we would say constructive feedback. Yes. If I'm giving you constructive feedback, you might not like it, but you understand that this is going to be of your benefit because now you can improve. Yes. So the same with this, the same dynamic is happening if I'm walking my path with a heart, and for you it brings effects which you don't like, you can treat it as a constructive feedback from this other being. Yes.
But I mean, this is interesting. Like, first of all, yes, but then at the same time, what if I ignore it, right? Like, if I'm not conscious enough of it, and I just go like, you know what, Rein is just annoying with his constructive feedback. You know what? I'm like, and I get angry, and I go home, and I don't know, destroy my computer, or someone else because of your constructive feedback, right? So and that might bring someone else down in that sense, because I'm not accepting the feedback. I'm not saying I don't want your feedback, and therefore I go to someone else potentially and make their lives worse, right? And that might start a negative cycle. So how do you think it still uplifts everyone else?
Well, in the end of the day, if we draw a line, then it doesn't matter on which side of the line you will be having your experiences. You will still get the feeling of the line. Yes. So the same with rules or agreements. I can make an agreement, and then I have two choices: whether I keep the agreement or whether I break the agreement. But in both cases, I will learn something about the agreements. So in that sense, it doesn't really matter if I don't like your critical feedback. I'm still learning, and even if I go and do destructive experiences or things in my life, I will get an experience, and therefore I will learn. At some point, I have an opportunity to review: is this really working for me? Yes, am I really getting the results that I want? And maybe then at some point you would say, okay, what could I do differently? And then you become interested in this type of feedback. But if it is working for you, then there's no problem. Yes, you just keep on doing whatever you decide. That's the freedom we have.
But then whenever we when we do that and we get into the face of other people, that's when I think it gets interesting. Let's make it practical. I'll give you like a super practical example, and maybe you can tell me how you would work through it. So, for example, I'm not saying this is a path of the heart, but this is something I really, really enjoy doing, right? And it lifts me up, and it, like, sometimes, I'm not saying every day, but sometimes I really enjoy to put on my headphones and start cleaning the house. Now, when it comes to cleaning the house, I have a very specific definition of what that means for me, right? I'm not very good at it, but what I really am, like, once I start doing it, I love doing it. I'm in the flow. And specifically is I really like all surfaces to not have any items on them, right? So I want surfaces to be clean from items that are not supposed to be there. The less items on table surfaces, kitchen surfaces, the better. So I go about my day and I'm like listening to my audiobook, cleaning the surfaces, cleaning the house. Everything looks beautiful. And I'm very, very happy about myself. And I'm like, I'm helping my house. I'm helping my family. I'm doing things. I'm uplifted. The only downside is that all of these things have to go somewhere. And all of these things, in my mind, a perfectly reasonable location is a random place on a sofa. So at the end of the day, the sofa has a pile of 100 or 200 items that I've collected all over the house and just dumped them on the sofa, right? And I'm very happy about myself because the rest of the house is spotless. It's like shining, beautiful, and amazing. Of course, when my wife comes home, she gets very curious about the pile of stuff on the sofa, and she appreciates it a little bit less than I do, because, well, now she has to deal with a pile of stuff that I have generated by making the rest of the house very clean. So in that sense, I'm like very uplifted and very happy. But for her, it actually creates a problem, right? She now has to deal with something that she was not expecting, and therefore, like, I'm very uplifted, and she goes like, "Yeah, okay, the house is clean, great, but then what do we do with this thing, right?" How would you see that in this?
Well, everything is about experience. So you are getting certain type of experience when you do the cleaning. Yes, when you remove those things from the surfaces, and you enjoy this experience, which will create another experience for you, which is now related to those things piling up on the sofa, and then the experience. First of all, there's two of them. How do you view this sofa thing? Because does it not raise a questions for you already? I mean, I'm pretty sure it does raise some feelings or,
It's
in that moment.
it's the same thing as with the podcast. I'd love someone else to take care of the sofa.
Which generally kind of outlines your we in a normal language we call it responsibility. Yes, so being responsible for the actions and the outcomes that your actions are producing. So normal way of understanding responsibility is if you make you kind of need to fix the harm that your actions have done. Yes. Or you also need to own the credit or the positives upside that your actions have done. However, I'm viewing it more like in a sense of responding, which means that you also need to respond to the outcomes of your actions. So now there is this pile, and now you need to respond to the pile. And when your wife comes home, you need to respond to your wife. Yes. So if you respond well, there is no problem. Yes. The thing is, if you don't want to respond, and then you kind of, yeah, I don't care. Then if you look at your response, then this response uplifting anymore? If it's not uplifting, then we can say you are not being very responsible. Yes, you are only responding well to very limited set of events happening, but for others, it's kind of the response is not uplifting anymore. Meaning that this is another experience.
Absolutely, and I love that you touched upon responding and responsibility in general, right? I think to me, it's one of my core values, responsibility, and I kind of believe that if everybody took responsibility for their own lives, we would live in a much better world. But it seems to me that a lot of people are really trying to run away from responsibility. In my case, like, piles of stuff on the sofa, but it can be a metaphorical pile, right? Because a lot of the time people create these piles and then they say, well, it's my boss's fault, right? Or it's the government's fault. And I talk a lot about it, and I keep it is very interesting to me. Is like, how do you, first of all, have you seen this happening also, and second of all, personally in your teams or in your mentees, how do you help them have more responsibility? How do you help them to actually take this responding and responsibility thing seriously and live it in their life?
It is really simple. As in your example, we would need to kind of work on the response. On what was your response? Did you, when you saw this pile of things? I mean, you only need to respond to that event, and if you see that your response was impeccable, meaning that you used your thinking and emotions and actions in sync in that sense, meaning that you really felt that this is great idea that they are there, and you were thinking this great idea, they are there, and your action was that you left them there. Yes. So this is impeccable response to that pile of things. Then another event comes, which is your wife coming and not being happy. Now you respond to that event. So how do you feel about her? What do you think about her? And what is then your actions? So if you will respond this also in that sense, impeccable, being all of those are being in sync, as opposed to you feeling that I don't really like it, but then I'm saying, yes, I think it's okay. And they are not in sync anymore. So if you just respond to every situation that comes, and specifically the situations that are the outcome of your previous action, if you just respond kind of considering your own state of being, this is where we started. Yes, how do you feel, think, and do things? Then that's the only thing you need to do. Basically, you take one step at a time. You don't need to have any I don't know, processes or philosophical concepts or anything like this. Just let's take event, one experience at a time. Let's see what your response is. When you learn to work with one event, the next event, and 10 events, you get the hang of it. Yes, I understand. I'm responding all the time. I'm responding. So if I'm considering my own state of being at every response and then taking this into account when I make a next move, you are responsible for your life. You are. That's the only thing you need to do.
So like it sounds really nice in theory, right? So you kind of get your state of being, you feel how you're feeling, and you're trying to align your thoughts, your actions, your emotions, so that they're all aligned, right? And then you do your best based on that. But I see that a lot of people, and me myself included, often find it difficult to actually act in impeccably, right? So sometimes it's like, well, I want to really do that, but your thoughts are this, and then you go like, well, but I promised someone else to do this, and therefore I'm going to do something that is not in my heart or not in my emotions, right? So then you do something that is not impeccable. So how do you practice that? How do you practice impeccability?
Well, there is no other way than to try, yes. So every time you catch yourself, and I mean, the difficulty in most cases to get your feelings and actions and thoughts in sync is that we are not really aware of our feelings. And the reason we are not really aware of our feelings is, and here we also need to make a differentiation that feelings and emotions are not the same thing, is that we have not been taught how to work with feelings and what they even are. We know what the logic is. We think what the thinking is. This is all the education we get in the school is centered around thinking. Very little to do with how to work with feelings. So, however, in order to work with feelings, you would need to know how to work with emotions. Again, there is no training or no knowledge on how to work with emotions, which means that in most cases we are suppressing the emotions. We're not registering the emotions. We don't know how those lead to the feelings that we have, which the result is that I don't really know what I'm feeling. I might have a kind of vague feeling that something's not right for me. I'm thinking one thing, feeling, but I cannot kind of verbalize. So therefore, the difficulty of acting impeccably really boils down to being able to constructively use the emotions so that they lead us to the feelings. Then we get clarity about our feelings. Then it's not it's not that difficult anymore to put one on one together. At least we know what the impeccable action is. Of course, once we know it, we have another set of challenges because we might be afraid the outcome if I would act on this way. And then I'm faced yet another challenge, which is a challenge called fear. And then to work with this challenge, you need to imply another set of concept techniques and understandings, but it's possible. Yes, so it's one step at a time.
And I guess it's also about like big and small things, right? It can be small as a pile of things on the sofa, but it can be as big as, well, whether the startup or the company that you have founded is the thing you should be doing with you.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you deal with that, right? I mean, in both of our experience, we've met a lot of founders who are not supposed to be running the business they're running, right? Because they started it because of, say, wanting to make a lot of money, but they're not doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing with their lives. And I learned this from you. I remember that you did at one of the events, you did this questionnaire, and I shamelessly stole one question from it, and I use it everywhere now. It had there was that If you had, I think, $10 million or $100 million, or whatever the amount you want in your bank account right now, what you would be doing? And then a lot of people would basically answer something like, I don't know, I would start a charity in Africa, or I would become an artist, do this and this and that, but anything except the fintech blockchain AI startup that they're running right now. And that, I guess, the point of that question was to see if what they are doing is aligned with what they truly want to do. And when I ask this question, I find that maybe 80-90% of the time it's not. And like, how do you see that? Because like the numbers are just so high.
Yes, that is the reality. However, I again wouldn't kind of think it in terms that I'm doing now right things or wrong things, or this is something I'm not supposed to be doing, or this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I mean, we are learning the act of discrimination, which means that I need to understand whether things are black or white. I need to train this kind of skill. The same goes for me to walk a path with a heart. I also need to know and have experience what it is to walk a path with no heart. So in that sense, even if I would see that there's a founder doing a startup and this is not bringing joy and he cannot employ all the skills that he has doing that thing, and then this is still necessary experience for this person to kind of register that this is not perhaps a path with the heart. And we have different learning curves. Yes, some pretty quickly become, let's say, depressed. Yes, which is a good signal for me. Yes, this is a good signal, meaning that this kind of tells you that you need to change something. While some others can run it for a quite long time and be relatively, okay, not happy, not joyful, but I'm okay. Yeah, I can continue. But this is all part of their journey. So that you cannot say that this is now a wrong thing. They need to have this experience, because then they know if they change something that, this is a different thing. Once you have those differences, you can then choose whether you want to go back or how to turn. So all the experience that we are having are necessary. The only question in that sense could be is that what kind of journey do I want? Do I want a journey that is exciting? Do I want a journey which is bringing me a lot of joy, adventure? Or do I want a journey which is kind of tough and a struggle and boring or slow? Your choice. So as long as you're happy with the type of journey you have, there is no need to change anything. However, once you want to change something, then you can use everything you have experienced so far as a measuring board against what you can see. If I make a change, does it get more exciting for me, or it's more boring for me? So it's necessary, the experience. Every experience has personal power in it, and we need all of this. So it's really a question, what do I want out of my life?
And I think that is to ask and to try to answer. But it's a difficult one. I've been asking that question to myself all the time, and it seems like every day the answer is slightly different. But that is also, a learning. It seems to be like a learning thing. It's not like it's different. It's more like it's expanded rather than different. But I find it very important to ask. But listen, I have a very practical question on this, right? Like, as an if they have this difference, would you still invest?
That's a
As
good
in, like,
question.
like they're still, like, they're doing a blockchain startup or whatever, and it seems like but you ask them this question and they go like, well, I actually want to do, I don't know, helping people somewhere, right? Or doing something entirely different in the medical space. Would you still invest? Is this a big factor?
It is true that if I make investment decisions, that I am trying to assess if this person is on his path with a heart, or if not, are they going to need this experience of success in order to get to the path with the heart, or they would need the experience of failure in order to get to the path with the heart. So therefore, it's not very wise for me to invest in a company where I feel that this founder is not at the moment the path with the heart, is very likely to discover this throughout the failure. Yes. So then it's not a good idea to invest. I would simply lose my money, because then I will also have this, I will have the learning experience with the founder.
Yeah, absolutely. And consideration, I guess, for you. But I'm also curious now, now that we started talking about founders, companies, and businesses, right? Like, because the question is like, okay, like when you went Playtech, you were kind of, financially at least successful and helped to build a successful company without all of this knowledge, right? And now that you have all of this knowledge, do you think it helps? Do you think like it helps, or how do you think it helps, right? Because maybe it doesn't help to make it into a financial success, but something else happens, right? Like, do you think those are useful tools to run organizations?
Absolutely. I think that if you would think about humans as computers, yes, let's say you employ 500 computers. So if your knowledge on the computers is really on a very basic level, you only know how to browse YouTube and send emails, then most likely this organization will not be very efficient. You won't be able to use those 500 employed computers very well. And if they create a mess, you have no idea how to fix this mess, and so on. So interestingly enough, that we don't think the same about humans. We don't consider that. We would need to know really, really well how a human operates in order to lead other humans. And there is no way of understanding another human unless you understand yourself, because you cannot see into the other being. You can only see into yourself. But once you see yourself, for example, when I discover how I am suppressing anger, I will detect your suppressed anger in a split second. If I know if I'm on the path with the heart or not on my path with the heart, I can talk to you and I can sense whether you are on it or not. If I have no clue about myself, I will not be able to detect anything in you either. So I don't see that there is any other way how to actually lead people without not getting to know how you function. And I think in general, great leaders, by definition, they consciously think about it or not, they know themselves pretty well. That's why they know how to lead others pretty well, even if they don't follow any particular training or philosophical path or self-discovery path or whatever. They still know, yes, how they themselves act in different situations. They have had a lot of experience in their life, which they have discovered how they respond differently. They know those things. So they are using their own knowledge of self, whether they are aware that they are using of it or not, in order to lead others. So it's super. I think this is the kind of main leverage you can have leading leading people in that sense. The only challenging part is that once you know yourself very well, you will have I don't know how to say, ethical or moral dilemma. Because if you start to explore yourself, you will also start to understand that, for example, the same thing, if you're not following your heart. So therefore, if you now see another person, for example, he's coming to a job interview and you are offering a job position, and you can see that this is not to their heart, whether you use this skill now to kind of hire this person or not. Yes. So if you now start to follow this kind of heart's guidance, you will discover that you cannot not you cannot build any type of companies or organizations anymore, because this will not be your calling. This will not be the calling of those people, and all of those things will start to influence you, meaning that eventually you thought you are going to be a great leader because now I know so well myself and others. In fact, what happens is that you become follower, and you will become the follower of your own inner being. And this means that you cannot anymore create businesses and organizations like you thought you would have, but instead you are creating those which your inner being is envisioning and dreaming in.
I mean, I mentioned, like, what all this, right? I have a lot of thoughts on the matter. I've been exploring myself for a while. But like, as an organization, right? Do you start with just interviews, or do you start with psychometric tests? Like, where do you start to get to know your people and to understand yourself, right? So, okay, first, I understand that you're saying that the first thing to do is you need to understand yourself, right? But then understanding others is a whole different game as well. I mean, of course, you recognize immediately the things you're very aware of, but then if you're trying to do it at somewhat like a bigger scale, like, what do you do? But in Cocoon, you also use, like, say, predictive index analysis, right, of learning a little bit about personalities through psychometric testing. But like, what other techniques and things are important for you to understand, like, how to build an organization, how to build a team? Like, maybe you can give a few examples of what you have done yourself.
So to narrow down your question, you are asking how to get to know the people you are having an organization together or a company.
I think that would be a very reasonable summary of the question. Yes.
Well, in essence, you need to use everything available to you, because that's kind of investment that always pays off. So some things you can get quickly from, let's say, profiling tools. Yes, like you mentioned, I use predictive index. I can use also esoteric tools. I can use numerology if I want. But I think the most important tool is that you would need to spend time in building the relationship and understanding the dynamics of that relationship, so that essentially you would need to assess what the personality is like, which type of challenges this person is having, where is this kind of, what's the purpose of this person, to the extent the person knows it. So you want to see the person definitely in action. It's not, problem of the interviews is that it's just talk. So that's also why we, in the Cocoon events, when we want to see learn about founders, we put them into a play. Yes, we give them we put them into the teams, we give them a task, and then I would observe how they interact under pressure, in the unknown, whether how they interact with other personality types, if some people are very modest or very loud or very stubborn, and so on. So I would need to know a lot of those things. So any experience, any tool that I use just adds a little bit of more.
And do you think, like, if you CEO of a company or startup, I'm sure you have a lot of experience with that, with talking to a lot of them, right? Like, do you think they? I'm trying to formulate a question that would. So I have a question inside of me, and I think that the interest there is that how often do CEOs actually do these things, right? Because, like, the normal CEO thing that we see in the news, or day to day, it's kind of managing operations, right? Managing stuff, right? But how much do you see that CEOs do this, or how much do you think they should be doing this? I mean, percentage of their time, or in general, like, how would you see them employing these types of tools?
From my view, the bigger the organization, the more the leader is working with relationship and less with specific functions, specific business skills. I don't know, putting together budgets or marketing strategies and so on. So the work becomes more and more on work on relationships. So whether this is now knowingly done or not is a different question. But the bigger the organization, the more you're forced to do it anyway. As for the people I'm working with, they are all putting effort in the relationship. Otherwise, they wouldn't be talking to me. Yes, there would be no reason to talk to me, because that's the skills that I want to pass on. So therefore, my statistics is very skewed. Yes, the CEOs that I'm meeting and working with are super interested in those things, and therefore I think this also becomes their greatest unfair advantage, because they to take this into account.
Can you give a few practical things that they should be doing? Get like at some practical things that maybe people can take away.
So this was a question.
I guess yes, like or request some practical tips of where to start, what to do.
You mean for leaders?
Yes, I mean for leaders. If something comes to you for just a person in an organization that is maybe not a CEO, but in a big organization and just an employee, and they go like, well, I hate my life. Maybe they would also benefit from some sort of practical tip.
I think there is no point of touching some new topics instead of what we already covered so far. I think it's super practical to start from exercising the state of being exercise, meaning get curious about how firstly yourself are feeling at any particular moment. So what are the emotions, what are the thoughts, what are the experiences you just had that are still influencing you, and ask the same from your team members, from your colleagues. Get curious, and also it opens completely new ground. Yes, why do you certainly ask those things? Yes, that's why very practical thing is that if you ask about experiences, definitely do include asking about experiences outside of the work, because usually people in the workplace tend to kind of cut off, and then if I'm asking so how we're doing, then they will give me all the experiences that they're having in terms of their work, but they don't tell me that their son is sick and that the cat has been castrated and so on, which would be very super important for me to know, because this is influencing and it's there with you. So opening up and starting with these kind of questions, you start to build trust that it's, and also safety, that it's okay to share, it's okay to be human. And from there, you can start practicing the impeccability, meaning try to then take this into account. If you take your own state of being into account, and then you act to the best of your abilities, then you are becoming impeccable. So step by step, going further with those, and then we had this tool of assessing whether you are close or far from the path with the heart. So if I would reiterate then again, do assessment, how many skills of yours and talents and qualities that you have, you are able to utilize today, put into the use, and how much joy does it bring. So if you put those both from 0 to 100 scale, or let's say 0 to 50, yes, so 0 to 50 of the skills and qualities, and 0 to 50 how much joy you get out of this, you will get from 0 to 100 scale how aligned you are with your path with heart. So those three simple tools already make a lot of difference.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And you reminded me reading or re-listening to a book called The Great Game of Business, which is about open book management. And in there, listening to it yesterday, and what you said reminded me of this openness and trust, right? And what I found very interesting in the book that they mentioned, and I fully wholeheartedly agree with this, is that like if you're only showing kind of one path of yourself or only one path of your business to your employees, for example, if you to your employees only showing the good numbers about your business and you never show the bad numbers, or if you're always coming to the office and you're always 100% happy, right? You always like have a fake, sometimes it's real, sometimes it's a fake smile, right? Then you will never have trust because people know that that's not realistic, right? It's not realistic to always be happy. It's not realistic to always have positive numbers. So if you always hide something and you don't open yourself up, you will never have trust because people feel that there's something amiss, something is not right. And I think, yeah, that is definitely the thing that I learned the hard way as well, of learning to open up and actually showing vulnerability sometimes, because that shows that you're real and you trust, and like, and then people can relate to you. And wholeheartedly agree on opening up about like practical stuff. It is, the state of being exercise, I think, is amazing. In especially like even in group meetings, you can do it with like 5, 6, 7, 8 people, 10 people, because if you have a meeting and then some, like we had that example at the last Cocoon event in Helsinki, where if funeral and another person comes from a wedding and they're in the same room, well, the energy of the room is going to be very much affected. And if you don't know this information, you can't really have an effective meeting at all. So, yeah, I agree. Absolutely. We have a question from a very dedicated audience member to Rein, which is Lola, who is your daughter. And she's asking you, why did you go to Dima's podcast in the first place?
The answer is very simple. I don't like to be in podcasts. Yes. I don't like to be very public about what I'm doing. However, I kind of feel that this is where my inner being is showing me to go. So I'm trying to follow the lead, yes. And the moment I verbalized that, okay, I will take this guidance from my inner being, you sent a message. I think it was like 5 days later after the decision I made that I'm now ready to tackle the challenge of being publicly more visible. So here I am trying to follow the lead of my own soul.
Thank you. I'm it's took you here because I think I invited you to similar events in the past, and it was always very difficult to do. But I think it's just the right time as well. Like I think it always works out for the better in the end. So I'm glad you're here. There was another question from the audience. Now that we started taking questions, Vito is asking that. Okay, so like once you've done this mapping of, I assume like syncing the team. When do you, for example, see that the state of minds are considerably differentiated or different, and it is like recurring that it's happening often? Uh, like, what do you do then? And any examples of the skills you should practice as a
So if the state of being is very different for different people, or
well, the question is that how do you sync the team, right? So the state of beings are very often very like wide apart and very different, and this yeah, and it keeps happening all the time. So how do you calibrate that? And anything you can do as a team to start managing it more. That's the way I understand it, at least.
mhm. So this is something you cannot really control any further as opposed only by leading by example. Meaning, even the question itself. Let's say you have a group of 7 people and doing a meeting, and then you will share the state of being. Then you cannot kind of manage how person A is relating to person P. The only thing you can do is to be considerate of that state of being yourself. And by this, you set the example of, let's say, if someone is already stressed, then you don't at that point start giving a lot of critical or even constructive feedback, because the batteries are currently on low for that person because of the challenges he or she is having. So therefore, this is a time for actually to share encouragement. So, however, if someone is really in a good state of being, then this is a perfect opportunity to give some constructive feedback, because they have the energy to learn and to grow and to do something even better. So even if you would basically use those two methods, whether you are sharing your love and warmth, or you are confronting and showing something that is maybe difficult for the person to kind of digest and take in, meaning all types of feedback, if you kind of differentiate whether I'm hugging you or whether I'm pushing or nudging you to go further, depending on the state of being, this is already enough for the dynamics to start working. And if you explain this principle for the whole team, everyone are capable of assessing themselves as well. Some are better, some others are less, but it becomes better and better as a group all the time.
And maybe I would add that I like to also understand each person, and again, like predictive index is one I like to use because it's more available with Jordan Peterson's Big Five. It's based on the same thing actually. Understand myself. It's the same type of test, and there you have like some 5 traits like agreeableness, anxiousness, extroversion, neuroticism, and openness to experience, the main 5. And I think knowing that, for example, is extremely important for people you work with, right? And I think in my view, it's kind of like, you can have this test done and it's very, practical, scientific thing, but you can also try to get it through experience and know doing it casually and understanding who they are as people, because then you'll know how to act with them, right? For example, if somebody extremely high on politeness, then you will know that they're saying yes to everything basically, right? And therefore you need to be very them tasks because they're so high in politeness. That means that there's likely that they will, and especially if they're high in politeness and very high on what was the other one, so industriousness and orderliness, and that means that they basically have a very high and desire to complete their job, right? Well, that means that they're going to say yes to everything, right? And then they will burn out, and you will be like, oh my god, they're so great, they always say yes to everything in every meeting, but you don't realize that is creating a huge problem for them, because they might all high on neuroticism, withdrawal, and volatility. So at some point they'll blow up and everything will go to hell. If you don't know these things, right? Like how you're supposed to really, manage a team, and that's what I love. And I really loved your example of hiring computers without knowing, like not even having a manual or something. I think that's a beautiful metaphor for managing people, and I think that's a lot of time that's exactly what we do, not just in jobs, but also in like personal relationships, right? Like how often do you sit down and do like an interview with a partner or something to figure out who they are? But I think it's very useful, right? Me and my wife, we just did a shared couple test with this Jordan Peterson. It's fascinating to learn about. Interesting, and it also makes some things like very easy. Like for example, like the example I brought about the pile of stuff on the sofa. We both did the test, and there's a part on orderliness. How much you like order, and we are both extremely low. I think I was like 6 out of 100, and she's like 11 or 16 out of 100. So we're like in the lowest spectrum of orderliness. And then that actually gives us the power to laugh about it. Right now we're going like, well, that's who we are, right? And that means that we don't have to be so stressed about it, because we go like, well, we know this, and then we don't have to like push each other to clean all the time, because well, we just don't see some elements, and it's going to be very difficult. You cannot force a person to be orderly if they are not, right? I think it's very important to
Yes,
do these things.
you are touching very important topic, which I call the topic of compatibility. So some people are more compatible, as you give the example of orderliness. So you are compatible because your needs and your understanding and vision for the orderliness is on the same level, which makes it easy for you to cooperate and to live together and so on. So the same is in the teams, that there are people are differently compatible with each other. However, the danger is that the strength is still in diversity. So if you make everyone compatible, this will be very weak team. So I'm always saying to leaders that in kind of putting together a team or even managing a team is always a load balancing exercise. So you're load balancing. You're always kind of choosing between something and pushing out something else. So if your team has, most people have a very high drive. In most cases, people with high drive have very little care for the details and rules. Yes. So if all of them have high drive, then of course this is a very driving team, but they never kind of, it's very difficult for them to build scaling teams, because this scaling means that you can repeat, there are rules, there are processes and so on. You need to attend to the details and so on. So they might be very compatible, but it's very one-sided. So now if you balance it out by hiring someone or management team, some people who are more kind of taking care of completion and orderliness and processes and so forth, then now the compatibility gets lower, because meaning there are certain types of conflicts that come into the picture. However, still there is strengths added to the team. So you're balancing of how much of conflict and how much of harmony and diversity you can have at any point in time. So this is a great art, and using some tools is super helpful, as otherwise it takes quite a lot of time and skill to assess this, all based on your own experience.
I don't remember who said it, but it was something like this, that first 10 hires or 10 people hire for compatibility and hire for basically, being very similar to one another. But after the 10, psychological diversity as possible. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, I would agree, because when you are starting out anything, you will be in a chaos. So you need to be at least manage, kind of balance the chaos or the unknown you are going to work in with known, and being compatible, meaning that you know how the other person are operating. So you reduce the amount of unknown you need to tackle. Plus, in the beginning, also you are starting, let's say, from a negative balance. Yes, therefore, again, compatibility consumes your personal power or energy level less, because you don't need to overcome very different type of thinking or perceiving things. So you are more energy efficient, and you will need that in the beginning if you kickstart something. So it's very logical to start with this way. However, if you stay forever like this, then you will become a weak team and you go very off track. Yes, you all think you need to go to Paris, but then because you like to think one way, having excluding all the other options, and then discovering that London is much better destination.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And yeah, I mean, for me, like this whole question of like workplace managing people, it is a very interesting one, because, and also in a society in general, like you said, we're like completely forgot the whole people side of things. And I'm curious about that. I mean, your kid is listening to us, maybe still. I don't know if she's still listening to us. After you answered the question, maybe she's not anymore. But that we're not taught these things in school, right? And we're not taught these things, well, really anywhere, right? So like, what would you own warrior school already, right? And that is not just for entrepreneurs. It's, I think, for anybody, right, who is
Yes,
who's
adults.
interested in these things.
Yes,
like
any
what.
grown up.
So I guess what I'm asking is, like, what do we need to do as society? Like, what do we need to do as society to change things around in terms of education, in terms of getting people to understand themselves more? What are the key things to focus?
Firstly, I don't think we can do anything as society differently as we are doing at the moment, which means that the change will not start from, I don't know, from leadership of the countries. It starts from single persons. So it's not rather a question what the society should be doing differently. The question is what I should be doing differently. And only one by one, people, if they get to know themselves and they start to get to be in sync with their inner being and understanding their own being more, one by one, this will change the society in terms of the topics that we discussed today. So it cannot be done in any other way around. So I don't think that there could be great elections and then we will have a great parties in ruling of the countries and so forth, and then everything will be fixed. Not gonna happen this way. So it's just the work for each single drop of water to change its color until the whole ocean is brilliant.
So in that case, and maybe this would be one of the final questions, unless we have more topics to discuss and they come up. I never know. I've done this a few times when I was like, okay, this is the final question, and then we continue talking for an hour. But what would you then say to individuals, right? So like somebody who listened to us, right? What can they do personally? Okay, we talked about that they can do things as a team or with other people, but like to not get to know themselves, like that part maybe, and like where to start, what they should be doing first and foremost to be that change, to change that you brought.
So the first question is that you need to get interested about yourself, and then if this is already there and you ask the question, so what do I really want, what do I really like, what kind of upsets me, and so forth, all those questions, what I'm supposed to do in this life, who am I really, am I the thing or the person or the whatever words I'm putting into this, or maybe there is something else, becoming curious about ourselves. If this is already there, many other things can follow. You can use either the tools that we started from here. Of course, in the school, we provide at least 200 different tools, but maybe one of the things that is of immediate use is the concept of mirrors, meaning that it's not so easy to see how we are operating. So therefore, we need to use something from which to reflect those behaviors back. And those are usually the people around us, and specifically the closest ones um, are doing the kind of most harsh of the mirroring, yes. Which means that anytime you see someone behaving in certain way, and this kind of pushes your buttons or kind of triggers you, then become very curious about this quality that you see. Let's say, yeah, you see laziness and this kind of triggers you. Become very curious in which ways you can have this quality, or how do you relate with that quality. Maybe you hate it because of your experience in the past, which means you're very charged with emotions. But these kind of are the entry points of discovery journey to the inside. So I mean, we can go endlessly talking about different tools, but it's really matter of starting, and you can start anywhere. You can start with any type of challenge you are at the moment facing. If we think about what is a challenge, I would say that if you have a challenge that you classify as a challenge in your life, then this means that there is some learning that your inner being wants you to do. And there is some growing that your inner being wants to do. Some say there is some healing, meaning growing, learning, and healing. They are all the same thing in the end of the day. So take the most active challenge and ask yourself, why do you need this challenge? What is this challenge trying to tell me? It's there because of your actions in the past, which are colored by your way of thinking, by a way of your emotional responses. So those actions in the past have materialized your challenge in this moment, and this is all for your growth and for your benefit. So therefore, if you approach, just the biggest challenge you have, whether in a personal relationship, maybe it's a business challenge, maybe it's a health challenge, maybe it's a challenge with your child, and so on, doesn't matter. It will tell you something about yourself, and this is the way you start to get interested in this, and eventually the color of the drop starts to change.
Awesome. Thank you, Rein. I have a going to be the last question, but I remember that I wanted to ask one question, but it's a three part question as a final question for the audience and for people to maybe do something and learn something. So I have a three-part question. So can you share with us a must-read book, a must-do activity, or maybe not must, but an activity that you think somebody should try, and one random message from the inner Rein that you are now trying to listen to?
Mm-hmm. I think at the moment the must-read book is the one we are translating into Estonian, and we will be releasing in December, which is The Journey of Adjustment, written by Teun Mores, and it will be available now also in Estonian. So definitely a good, and specifically to the question from where to start. This is the starting book in that sense. Second was
An action.
an action, a person.
It can be a question to answer. It can be something to journal. It can be something to add to their daily routine. Some sort of action that.
I think we stick to the topic of the of the podcast, which is that ask yourself, what is your purpose in this lifetime? And take this question very seriously by knowing that it is possible to answer it. Mostly people think that this is a stupid question, no one knows it, no one answers it, that this is just a waste of time. It is perfectly possible to start solving that riddle. And it is a riddle, it is not a kind of definite answer that once you answer it, it's done. It's a serious question which can be answered. So that's action. Take this question seriously into consideration. And the third was something random from the inner Rein.
Yes.
Yep. Let's see. Well, the very weird random thing is that I want to share that I really love human beings. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Sending all the love to you and also all human beings that listen to it now and maybe will listen to it in the future. Thank you for being on the podcast. If anybody's interested, check out Rein's Warrior School. Check out Rein's Cocoon program. I don't know if there's anything else they should check out, but at least those two I'm very much aware of. And I participate a lot. I'm a mentor in Cocoon. I really appreciate what you do, Rein. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for asking and to join. Enjoy the rest of the day and week.
Thank you. Ciao.